Start. Hi, Andrew Rosen, founder of the Medium Substack, Parkour. I am here with Tom Paton of AiMation. What's the previous studio was
Yeah, so
Pigeon
we
Shrine.
yeah, so we started out as a research vehicle first, and that was a sort of a jokey name. We were called Pigeon Shrine. Pigeon's the god of trash. Everything AI made for the first few years was pretty bad, but we offered it up anyway, and here we are today. So
And so, what I wanted to do, because you and I have spoken about three times, I think, since last November, and the difference between where you are where you were in November and where you are now is exponential, extraordinary. And I wanted to hear your story, I guess, and this is going to be for people who may not know your background. I mean, everybody
yeah,
saw. I remember there was press in the trades um, about your movie where the robots grow. But I'd like to just sort of go before that, the idea, the execution, what happened when you got it up, and then everything that's happened since, and then we'll dive into little areas along the way. Does that sound good?
yeah, sounds good. Okay, so my background is in VFX and coding, and then I got into traditional filmmaking. I did 10, maybe 11 full feature films. So I really got very good in the indie sector in terms of raising finance, figuring out tax credits, figuring out international territory sales, and kind of seeing where the holes in the ship were, and and started to really feel like, okay, this could be Titanic levels of bad when it sinks. And I kind of feel like when you see something like that, you should look out for opportunity. And so, I was kind of like searching for, well, what will be the Netflix moment of this impending shift? Because Netflix, they're not Netflix because they figured out how to stream. They got there first. There was technological innovation. They figured out how to stream 1080p when you could only do 360p. And they knew that digital editing and digital cameras and DSLR sales and the collapse of the territory sales was going to create the environment where they could create this economic innovation in streaming. And so, that was a real quest for me. What does that look like? First you have to figure out the technological innovation and then wait for the economic innovation to kick in. And so, 2021, COVID, like the rest of the world, people were kind of like twiddling their thumbs. I got lucky. I was doing a couple of traditional films in the Caribbean. But that's where the idea to kind of like take this machine learning stuff that I'd been looking at, and combine it with my background in VFX and code and knowledge of the film industry and go, okay, I think this is that technological shift. And so we started this research arm, raised some funding, and then uh, essentially began testing the technology, like throwing everything at the wall. We built this virtual production wall that's behind me. We tried AI with hybridization in terms of filming. We attempted full Gen AI stuff. We attempted stuff with Gaussian splatting. We kind of like ran the gauntlet of, okay,
Wait,
here's
hold
all.
on. What is that for somebody who doesn't know what that is?
Gaussian splat. So a Gaussian point is a mathematical point in space. Uh, and you can essentially take a 2D image of something from various angles and then use AI algorithms to guess where things would have been in that 3D space and turn them into 3D objects. And some really interesting tech going on there, especially in the 4D Gaussian splat space. But it became apparent to me after all of these testing, and we went ahead and we made like a full hybrid movie with a big Hollywood actor, a small crew of about 30 people. And in that I saw that the real truth was everybody else is going to dash for this. Everybody's going to try and convince Hollywood to skin graft AI onto their existing pipeline. They're going to say things like it's just a tool. They're going to say things like we can make your sets more efficient. But I think, being in the film industry, I realized Hollywood doesn't want cheaper stuff. It knows how to make cheaper films. It can do it with its eyes closed. It doesn't want to do it. That's like a fundamental misunderstanding of the business, and this sort of top-down stack of everybody gets a piece of the money at every step of the production, all the way to the consumer's eyeballs. And so two things I kind of realized were it's going to be a full Gen AI route that is going to be the economic innovation. And more importantly, it has to be its own economic lane. It can't be, hey, we're gonna mold with the traditional space. It has to be, no, this is a brand new economic lane. Much like how user generated content emerged and how streaming emerged, these are two relatively modern economic lanes for entertainment. And so I was like, okay, there's going to be something that appears here, and I want us to be the Uber of that. How do we make that lane where we don't necessarily need to own the IP, just like Uber doesn't need to own your car. But what we can do is build the stack from production tools right the way into the viewer's eyeballs. And so we started mapping out what that vision would be. We dubbed it professional generated content, or PGC, brand new lane. And from that, where the robots grow had to happen. Like, we had to show, okay, you can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to do this thing." You have to deliver, and that process has to be slow. It will take time for people to really catch on, and we're still seeing that now. Where the robots grow is still. I got a message, just yesterday from someone being like, "I just saw the film," and I'm like, "We that dropped in October," but it was a very calculated move, and so we made that film with a team of 9 people in 90 days, and the tech has come on just a staggering way since then. I mean, we could probably do that movie now using our on the Geno One platform that we can get into later. With probably like 2 people in about 5 weeks, maybe. So it's really come a long way. And we kind of danced with, I think last summer it was hard. We made this thing. Everyone was kind of like in the midst of, well, what's AI going to do? I think Jeffrey Katzenberg just said something like, in the next 2 years, someone will make an AI feature film. And then we were like, well, we've actually already done it. So there was all this buzz. And we kind of got lured into the system, the traditional route. People were like, hey, we want to buy this. We're going to make a big deal out of it. It's going to go on this pretty well-known platform. And then I saw the term sheets. It was like, look, we're eyeballing a quarter three, maybe late quarter two release of 2025. And I was just like, guys, we're a tech company. Let's just put this online and see who it shakes up. And so that's what we did. And things have just kind of been a sort of speed train since then, really. So that's how we ended up speaking.
And so that part of the story is my favorite part of your story, which is your moment when Hollywood did not look at you as a tech company, right? And that
No.
there was such an extraordinary disconnect in the way that they did business and the way that you assumed you could do business. But also, and this is the more interesting part of it to me, is the rate of change at which you were evolving and advancing. And so, to me, that part of your story, I think, is the most fascinating part. And it's not because in my mind, it was never like, oh, the old guys don't get it. I think it was much more that they did want to work with you, but they're just not in a place where they can work at the speed that you're working. And that has all that in my mind, that started with like, well, that's a really fascinating implication, which basically means that they're going to be more Toms, they're going to have more content, they're going to be able to produce theatrical quality movies, and it's not going to matter because whatever they produce within 3 months and 6 months is going to be outdated, right? I mean, and
Yeah.
so, and I mean, even today, Midjourney just released a new
Yeah.
iteration of the platform. And so you get to that point, and then our next conversation is February, and at that point, you're building AiMation.
Yeah, so we'd already built it, actually. So, I mean, look, where the robots grow, it wasn't like, okay, we build this thing and then where do we go? Like, we knew what it was. It was like, the first piece on the chessboard for us. That was its intention. We were already kind of building where we think this is going to go. And, to use that Netflix discussion earlier about, okay, what is the set of events unfolding that indicate where this could be going? And try to find out, okay, what's the economic route in that? And one of the things that's really apparent to me is that if you start a subscription service in terms of the film and TV world now, you can kiss your ass goodbye, because the psychology around subscription services in the last few years has really become one of like difficulty in terms of onboarding a consumer. And what Netflix are exceptional at, and it's taken the other guys some time to learn, is that when you run a streaming service, it's not actually about the content for the most part. You are a subscription retention algorithm. And so I need to log into Netflix and see 10 new titles with a picture that, might appeal to me. I will never watch any of these titles, but it's enough that subconsciously I see value for money and I don't cancel my subscription. And that is the actual goal. But meanwhile, the psychology around this is shifting where what the user expects for an upfront onboarding subscription service becomes infinitely impossible to chase because I used to buy a $15 CD with 12 tracks. That's value for money. Now for $15, I want everything ever made immediately, or I'm not going to do it in the first place. And so in comes microtransactions, really an import from the mobile gaming world, from the loot box world, of these sort of online RPGs. And you get companies like Webtoon emerge who really cause this disruption within the comic book industry and the manga industry. And there's a few reasons for that. One of them, the big one being that the user is forced to psychologically engage with the content, not having any effect over it. It's still linear, but they're touching the screen every 30 seconds to scroll up. And this is creating a habitual relationship between them and the content. And when you do that, just like when you're clicking on a joystick or you're on a computer game or your Nintendo Switch, paying for a loot crate or a microtransaction feels like a savvy choice. You're like, I'm engaged in this freemium model. I want this. I'm more than willing to drop, $15 on something just for this singular product. And so to me, that became like, okay, there's a theatrical replacement model here. And then Real Short came along, the rise of the micro drama, and kind of cemented that for me. That company, very similar tactic to Webtoon. But, again, I'm not looking for the bandwagon now. Like if you're chasing the bandwagon now, you've missed it. I was like, okay, what's the next bandwagon? Like, where do you go from here? And we'll build that. And so that's where this PGC line came up. And the idea was pretty simple. We're going to build a GVOD platform, a gamified video on demand platform, specifically for AI professional content. We're going to make it in such a way where the content is horizontal, not vertical. That lets you have a lifespan outside of the platform. So you can take advantage of all of those traditional window releases. You can still go after any one of these digital first platforms like YouTube, or you can go and put it on Hulu or Amazon, whatever. But you treat our platform like a theatrical window, where here the consumer is involved in this freemium relationship, habitually touching the screen, and is willing to pay for your solo product. And then on the other side of that coin is like, well, now you need to scale intellectual property. And sure, I can go ahead and hire thousands of employees, hoover up scripts, try to make the best stuff. And like we have our originals department that's focused on things like Where the Robots Grow and our AI reality TV line. But what I really want is to show the rest of the industry that, you know what, you said something funny earlier and it really clicked with me. The old guys don't get it. Like the old guys always get it. They get it because they've been around the block and they know where the money is. It's like you can show up in your emperor's clothes if you want and tell them, oh, you're a dinosaur and it's over. But they will see straight through the fact that you're not wearing anything. So you have to build something and you have to make it economically viable. And so going up to these companies and saying, who own all this intellectual property, and saying, we can make this thing cheaper than you've ever made it, and banking on the fact that the economics is so good that they won't be able to resist and they'll suddenly start buying content from us. I think you will lose. I think that will essentially see AI relegated to just something you do in post-production. And to me, I'm like, well, there's another avenue. Every single one of these companies, for every one project that greenlights, there's 20 that sit there collecting dust. They had millions in development spent on them, but for whatever reason, the package just didn't come together. PGC allows them to take that content and make it ultra quickly. So it's no longer just a script.
PGC before that. So PGC is
professional generated content.
Okay, good.
So this is a lane allows them to take these scripts, these projects, and make them intellectual property, turn them into anime, turn them into animation, repeatedly dip into something. And then for those that pop and have the audience, send them back to traditional. Like, why not make a ton of money? So offering a new economic lane. And to do that, well, I don't just have to have the GVOD platform. I also have to have the final draft of this where I can give it to you, Andrew Rosen, and you're like, okay, so if I get myself a competent editor in, what do I get? And we're like, okay, you get enterprise support from us. It's token based, so you set your own budget spend. You can make the same sort of stuff that we make at the same speed, and you get full support from our team. But more importantly, you also get end to end encryption, you get documentation for all the prompts, you get the stuff that you might need to robustly defend yourself in court. Oh, and by the way, we get a non-exclusive license for the content on our GVOD platform, which you can buy us out of at this stage if you want. But the idea is pretty simple. Once this content starts to flow through, and it already has, we don't launch on the Gen until June 30th, but we have signed two major studios, six of our pretty sizable mid-level indie houses, and more are coming every day. We've just expanded into Sweden. We've just expanded into Germany, Australia. So we're going to be quite aggressive over this over the next few months. But the idea is simple. People will realize that PGC is an extremely viable economic lane to take inactive projects or ancillary intellectual property expansion and really monetize it in a way that doesn't cannibalize their existing industry. It simply gives a brand new lane for them to make a lot more money on top of what they're already doing. And that, I think, is the power of what AI can become. I've never believed in this. Like, the moment we did that hybrid film, I was on set, I was camera operating because I was like, I just want to be as close to the tech as I can. So I'm shooting this thing and we're about halfway through and I just thought, this isn't it. They don't want, no, like,
Wow.
no one wants this. And I knew it then in like 2020, I think that was winter of 23. And I knew it then. And I'm seeing now that that's the race. That's the race from everybody. Let's get this hybrid workflow going. And meanwhile, we're over here quietly building PGC and, making waves, I think, where they can.
So two questions from one of my subscribers, Anand Shah, who has his own business um, in the sort of Indian diaspora space. Uh, so Anand asked, if the value of IP is being commoditized, what's the value in scaling IP?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question because it kind of you're having to approach that in the sense that IP still has the same value it did for the past 100 years. And, again, let's use the Uber analogy because unfortunately, some of these things you just can't stop. They're inevitable. And I have a specific reason why I think this is true. But if you think about the taxi industry, owning a nice car was a very expensive endeavor that you really had to pour a lot of resources into. So it made sense that taxis were run in a certain way, that specifically limo drivers, etc., had them. And then over the last 25, 30 years, nice cars have become commoditized. Even a sort of low-end car has a luxury brand feel to the inside of it. And so now you don't really mind getting in a sort of $25,000 car, sure. So now the specialty of the car vanishes. And so it makes it accessible for somebody to go, okay, let's take all of these cars and find users for them. Let's connect them with the users. So it doesn't necessarily devalue the car. What it does is expand the potential user base for it. And intellectual property, I think, is going to head that direction. And the real reason it has to head that direction is there's a new form of piracy coming that I've been screaming and shouting about since 2022. And I think, this model that we're building is the only way for IP holders to continue to make sure that that IP has value. And this piracy is not like anything we've ever seen. Right now you might have a pirate outfit in Taiwan or Sri Lanka, and maybe they're making Nike footballs and they're flooding the market space in that territory with 300,000 Nike footballs. Trading standards will get hold of most of them, but the 10 or 20% that squeak through, $5 here, $2 there, millions in revenue, that makes it worthwhile. If I'm in traditional Hollywood right now and I'm spending $250 million on a new film of Pirates of the Caribbean 6, and suddenly a year from now, I realized that this pirate outfit isn't making night footballs anymore. It's making 300,000 Pirates of the Caribbean films 2 hours long at speed and dropping them on monetized channels all across the internet. And just as fast as I pulled them down, they put up a brand new one. Some of them are really awful, but some of them are great. It's just hit and miss, roll of the dice. And this starts to happen to all intellectual property across the board. Every time you have a successful episode of a show, there's 200 brand new episodes that have got nothing to do with your one that's coming out next week, beating you to the mark. And users start to become confused because they're like, okay, I need some semblance of clarity in this. I don't really want to go to the cinema anymore because I'm now consumed by AR and audio computing. So the cinema doesn't appeal to me. Where's the theatrical win? Where's the value in your IP? If it's in a dedicated PGC line that is curated, that people just can't flood into using a specific stack, then users know to come here and spend that $20 on this version and ignore this noise or use it as fanfic or whatever they want. But what it will do is it will cause serious economic strife to the current distribution models that we've got. And so I don't see PGC as devaluing intellectual property. I see it as the only optimal route for maintaining some sort of value within IP as we move forward.
And so the other thing that you talked about was, and this is from the AI filmmakers interview that I caught of yours. I think is, for people who watch this, I think it's highly. I'll include the link in when this goes up in the post. But it's a great interview. But my favorite part of it is when you start talking about the pirates in Taiwan and you're going through this exact scenario. But then one of the things that you predicted is that at some point blockchain inevitably has to be part of the solution. Could you talk a little bit about how you envision that working?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like it's weird. I think the talk you're on about was probably like November last year. But
Yeah, it's
you're
like
seeing the
yeah.
Yeah, you're seeing the seeds of that really coming to fruition right now. Particularly when I think about the Mid Journey lawsuit that's going on right now. So if you look at Google, they announced the sort of hidden sort of watermark within all the AI content they make. OpenAI have similar plans. And so these big players are working towards a method where, on the surface, it sounds like, okay, we're going to catch all the AI content and that way we can stop misinformation from leaking out. But if you just go beneath the hood one level, what you're actually doing is providing a way for companies like Disney or Fox to do a weekly scrape of the internet, identify all AI content that is using their intellectual property, and then send them some sort of blockchain contract that says, hey, you don't have to take this down, but you do have to split the money with us 50-50. And as that grows exponentially, it becomes a case of, well, is it really worth us being in production anymore when we have this sort of UGC version of using the intellectual property that's making us billions? And again, this is why I think PGC is so essential because all these creators who are suddenly like the banquet has been on IP, known IP for the last few years. This stuff becomes the domain of UGC. So now there's a rush to go, what's fresh, what's new, what's the intellectual property that can go down the PGC line? We can test it. If it performs well, it can go to the traditional line. And so, I think that this seems to me like the only sensible outcome. And I do think long term, over the next, 10 to 15 years, you'll see traditional media, especially the biggest studios, shrink down to we just own IP. We let UGC content make the money for us. I think it's inevitable. And the Mid-Journey suit, well, Mid-Journey don't watermark their content, right? So you don't want that out there. How will you catch it?
Yeah, that one's an interesting one. One of the things that I've put out there that I think that not enough people talk about, and this is just from having been inside the building when I was at Viacom, is that there was always a tension between piracy and marketing,
Yeah.
and that you wanted people sharing clips of your content or GIFs or images, even if it wasn't approved by the company, because you needed brand awareness on the web. And so a lot of what these models are trained on, like I actually think they're trained on more of those posts than they are any sort of
Yeah.
pirated IP. I think the scale of those posts far outweighs whatever the weight of of like a pirated copy of Star Wars. And so I think it's a really I didn't know about the watermark part of it because I hadn't seen it in the covers, but that's a really like that's a key detail that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, like
Um,
why go after Mid Journey? Why not go after like Google VO3 has stormtroopers all over the internet taking it by storm, no pun intended. Uh,
do
why
you think
go
that's
after Mid
intentional
Journey?
by
Yeah,
Disney? I feel like
100%.
stormtroopers were the cannon fodder of the Star Wars universe. I feel like if you're ever
Listen,
going to test anything, you test a stormtrooper.
you're already seeing this behavior emerge. Last year, there was, I believe it was Hollywood Reporter, I might be wrong, but they ran the expose on the fake AI movie trailers and
Yes.
why the studios were not pulling them down. And then it turned out they were actually taking 50% of anything these trailers made. So they're like, we're not taking this down. We make money from it.
Right.
So they already know that this is an extremely lucrative economic model that they could pursue, especially in unstable times where you're not entirely sure what the future of distribution, in particular theatrical, looks like. Like, how are you going to get users to go to the cinema when they're wearing AR glasses? They can have their own 300-inch screen at any point, and they won't take the glasses off to sit in the cinema and watch the film because their AI is talking to them and showing them things. The theatrical market becomes extremely niche. So you need a backup plan. And that backup plan better be twofold. It's going to have to involve blockchain technology for identifying use of your IP and monetizing it, and the emergence of something new. And I think all of their focus is on that side, not this side. And meanwhile, that's what we're building.
Is the are you Do you find that I mean, I talked to an IP lawyer and I brought up your case and they said, well,
Yeah,
there is such a thing as compulsory licensing. So yes, it makes sense that this could happen. But the blockchain part of it's the really interesting part of it because it's not common practice, right? It's still kind of we're still coming out of the disappointment of what Web3, whatever people thought Web3 was
sure.
supposed to be. Um, it's from your perspective, because again, like you're talking to studios, what are you seeing?
I mean, I think blockchain is an excellent technology in search of a purpose and has yet to find one, and that's kind of why the big decentralized revolution didn't happen. We didn't all jump on the blockchain because there was a lack of purpose. But in this shifting IP world, its purpose becomes exponential as the ultimate business tool for uh, globally using AI agents to notify potential users of your copyright and transact with them in a seamless way. And I think it becomes the primary use case for it. I kind of think it's interesting because I think the reason the big studios will go this route is because it's so frictionless for them. And using Web3 for anything else always just feels like extra steps. Like, why are we doing extra steps here? And it feels like that to users as well. So I think this is, it becomes a bit of a no-brainer, especially because you're going to be dealing with like cross-border transactions. And even if you only catch 10% of the content, even if you only get 10% of it, that economically will probably outweigh what you would make theatrically in any given year. And I think they can see
Just
that.
because you think the scale of this stuff is going to take
The
off.
scale, the scale will be so exponential.
Yeah. So the next question is, so it sounds like the blockchain savvy just isn't there yet, but that's a problem with blockchain. That's not necessarily a problem with the studios. Then
Sure.
the second part of it is, you mentioned earlier you're talking to studios, and we've discussed this, but I do think the one thing, if you could share, is the savvy that you do see when in your conversations with them about the piracy, about the tools, about the potential impact to their libraries of IP.
Look, I mean, I think it's funny, right? When you're having any of these like meetings, even if you're doing like a big talk, like I go and do like a talk and like I did one in Stockholm, there was like 300 people there. There's only ever two kinds of audience members. There's only ever two kind of executives that want to meet you. The first type is, how screwed am I? Just tell me straight. How bad is this? And then the other one is like, how did we get really rich from this, but without messing up what I'm already doing? Uh, you know, and so there is obviously a lot of fear and ambiguity around the technology. And that's because I think the entertainment industry has been on shaky ground for a while. Nothing to do with AI at this point. Uh, a disappearing DVD Blu-ray market. Somewhere like Japan used to be worth $1 million for an indie action film as a 7-year territory license. Now it's worth $5,000 if you're lucky. The market has completely collapsed inwards, and the bit of it that is still working is the production and the tax credit side of it, and that's where people are still making money. If you're inside pre-production and production, you're like, well, we can see there's a disaster coming, but right now the cash is still flowing at this end. So we'll just keep the tap on for as long as there's water running, which is why I believe this approach of, oh, we can make your stuff more efficient. They're like, well, we don't want that, not until we have to. Um, but they're all very aware that something is going to happen, that the shift will more than likely be in the distribution side of things. But, knowing something's going to happen and wanting to do anything about it are two different things, right? Like, just because I come and sit in your office and say, the pirate apocalypse is coming, they kind of go, okay, what do we do? And that's kind of my job as somebody running a company, is to go, okay, this is an economic route forward. The seeds for making it work have to be planted now. And then by summer of 2026, I think we'll see a rapidly shifting market around this. And by 2027, you will trust this economically more than you trust the other route. And they go, okay, maybe you're crazy, but I'm in. We'll give it a try. And that tends to be how a lot of these conversations are happening lately. Because, sure, I mean, look, I think there's probably 6 or 7 other dudes in the space that I'm like, yeah, you guys might have a route that's viable. Mine is very different. And I think right now, most studios know that they can't afford to not hedge their bets because change is clearly imminent.
So when it comes to hedging their bets, like I mean, and forget the making more efficient point, but your app has two things that are like fundamental paradigm shifts for them, right? And number one is obviously the real short model, where all of a sudden Netflix is like the Netflix traditional streamer model all of a sudden looks outdated, right? That demand now can be fragmented into, I'm either interested in finishing this or I'm just not interested
Not.
at all.
Yeah.
And then the second part of it is the way that you produce these movies, right? That
Yeah.
and or these shows, I guess, because my favorite example, and I'm still totally fascinated by it, is the NPC one, right? The non-player combat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have others, and please talk about whatever ones you want to share, because then you have the documentary about Mars. But I'm really, that one to me, just forget efficiency. It's that you put a bunch of puzzle pieces together in a way that's wasn't only just sort of amazing and sort of imaginative, but also like that the final product is fun to watch. And in a way that's like that but when I knowing the pieces that went into it, right, which is the 200-page bios written by AI for each of the characters in it. And I'll let you explain what it is, but just all the puzzle pieces together, from an imagination perspective, are actually kind of overwhelming if you're just a traditional media content consumer.
Yeah, I love how enthusiastic you are about it, because that's exactly what we're trying to do with it. But I mean, I guess we should step back a little bit and then talk about that. I think the thing that I think is problematic right now, if you go back 10 years, if you said, oh, I work in user generated content, that was a dirty word. Like what we're doing right now, this user generated content thing was like, and here we are 10 years later, and me saying, yeah, so I work in traditional at Warner Brothers, is like, oh, is everything okay? But you say I work in user generated content, and I assume you must be driving a top of the line car, because it's like everybody makes a fortune online, right? Yeah. So there's been a real paradigm shift there. And one of the key questions we were asking ourselves when we were building this and we were plotting this out was, why? Why is traditional media losing the battle to user generated content so badly? Like there's a core reason to it. And that is, I believe that the traditional media landscape was built on this idea of culture. And culture is, thousands of year old human tradition, but it takes time. Like culture's like moss on a rock. It doesn't form overnight. It takes a lot of time to sort of settle, takes a lot of time to become rock solid. But once it's on there, it's quite hard to pressure wash it off. It's like took root. But we don't have culture anymore. The internet has changed the fundamentals of what culture is forever, and it will never go back. Now we're in this meme space where, now if I said, who's hot to a girl, people are like, who? So that was all the rage for like 3 weeks, and then it's gone. There's no time for moss to settle on the rock anymore. And this is a
Yeah.
real problem if you've built your whole industry conceptually on this. Star Wars is Star Wars because, it rolled out in 77 and then the rollout was slow and it kept going. And 2 years later, people are still queuing around the block to get into a cinema. Like, that's culture. Star Wars now is here, have some more Star Wars. Are you happy now? It's like, no, give me more Star Wars. Like, that's where we're at. Um, User
Yeah.
generated content.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
No, no, go ahead. But I was just to say the stormtroopers thing is come and gone like that.
Yeah, but the reason that it did this, right, is user generated content feels immediate and it feels relevant. The problem with the traditional line is if I write a script and me and you go and get it packaged and budgeted and we go shoot this thing, by the time it gets to an audience's eyeballs is 2 years later. And we were probably talking about social or political or economic issues that, at the time felt like, oh my God, look how ahead of the curve we are. And now people are like, if this has got anything to do with the pandemic, I will go crazy. I never want to hear that word again because we're like inundated with information at such a rapid speed now. And the Stormtroopers thing is a great example. Like, it blew up bigger than most of the Star Wars content we've had from Disney because
Yep.
it felt immediate and it felt relevant. It was like, here's this cultural moment, have it, consume it, and then move on to the next thing. If we're going to
And
have any chance of saving professionals' jobs, we have to also find a way to become immediate and relevant. And there are two guys that have been doing this for 30 years now. Trey Parker and Matt Stone from South Park have developed this 6 days to air, immediate, relevant thing. South Park's doing as well now as it was 20, 30 years ago. It's never out of the zeitgeist. It still pulls in a multi-generational audience. And it's because it appeals to that UGC model. It's immediate, it's relevant. How do we do that? Well, we can use AI to take your super hot script from 4 weeks ago and let's put it in the audience eyeballs 4 weeks from now. It's immediate, it's relevant, it feels culturally zeitgeisty to the users. That's where the money is. And so that's kind of why the third party stuff is so interesting to me. But I'm also not stupid enough to think that that's enough to bring user engagement to the
right.
platform. Like, you can't just be like, oh, it's like what you've always had, but faster. You also have to have, and here's the thing you've never seen before. And so, you know, the company setup here, like I often say to the staff, I'm like, the CTO's role, his job is to make sure we don't lose any money. That's his job. CBO, CCO, their jobs are, how do we make 20% more money this year? And my job is, okay, what's the like crazy stuff? What's the emergent technology that makes us more than 20%? Like, how do we jump that? And that's where non-player combat came from. Is like looking at this like set of events and going, you could use AI to do a new form of reality TV that doesn't exist yet. And this in itself will become inherently water cooler. And so we took 6 non-player characters in a video game world. We hooked them all into their own AI agent, give them a 200-page backstory that they pull from. So they really kind of act like, this is where I went to school. This was my first love. This is the bills I pay. This is where I get my electricity provided from. And then we dropped them in the Hunger Games and let them battle it out for 4 weeks in real time, uh, and then edit that footage down into documentary stuff. So it feels like if the Hunger Games was real, sort of. And you kind of fall in love with these characters, especially when you realize no one's making these decisions for them. No one's making them do these things. There's a sort of ickiness where you're like, that AI just lied to the other AI. Do AIs lie? Like, is this bad? And there's this very like strange thing that starts to happen. And we in the studio, we became obsessed. Like, I knew we had something special because the sim was running real time on the TV in the office wall over there. And we've got it set up to a little alarm so that whenever 2 characters would come near each other, the alarm would go off. Everybody dropped everything and just ran, and then they would just walk off the other way and you're like, and go back to your desk. But like this fascination, this sort of voyeurism around, is it okay to watch this? I think it births an entire new media lane, AI reality TV. And this is why people will download AiMation. And when they get there, they're going to find all of your awesome third party content. And that's it. Once we're on your phone, we're on your phone. You won't delete us because we're not a subscription app.
Right. That's right. And so then, how- could you give me just the basics in terms of time and cost investment into the NPC?
Yeah, so NPC, kind of the joy of knowing what you're doing with this tech is you can scale this stuff very quickly, very efficiently, shall we say, cost wise. Um, but we use UE5 primarily, and then generative AI tech to do the cutscenes, so that you can add some dramatic weight to it. But very clear rules around you can only do what the AI characters did. You can only put dialogue that they really said in. Otherwise, it's not what you're saying it is. So these things were super important. Um, but running it was fairly effective. It was like doing an indie game. You're using UE5, you're using API enterprise calling to OpenAI and Gemini, Anthropic. Um, and your real hard cost comes in manpower in just okay, we've got to go through for 4 weeks worth of live footage as if it was Big Brother and rip out the good stuff. But we're getting better at that economically. We'll have agents running for season two. So
Did you have a game designer? Or is there a standard like environment in UE5?
yeah, so we use standard environments from UE5. We worked, with AI coding tools like Cursor as well. Having a background in VFX is helpful. Me and the team here, we're not
Newbies.
exactly, newbies to this stuff. So we were able to kind of lean into a lot of that stuff. But the most important thing was look, this is about pressing enter. Like even if the game world felt sparse in places, we're like, we can go in afterwards and we can dress up the jungle, we can expand, we can add these like aerial shots. But the important thing is that once you press enter, that the interactions are real, that this feels as human as it can. And you get to watch something that would never get the grid. Like no one's going to green light a death battle, for real. And so doing that is kind of the important part. It's like as long as you stay true to that, the rest of it you can do traditional filmmaking tricks.
So where are the parameters? The parameters are in UE5 or the parameters are within the AI or both?
A bit of both. So your decision making, your dialogue choices, that's coming from either ChatGPT or from Gemini, 11 Labs API calling as well. And then you'll have some game functionality built into the combat sequences, the way the environments work. So you're using the best of both worlds to pull that off. Uh, you know, so it really is just kind of a traditional NPC setup. These NPCs are wandering around game levels most of the time anyway. We just decided there shouldn't be any players. And to me, this is the interesting area where you can go, this appeals to Twitch viewers, this appeals to gaming fans, this appeals to, anybody of any age really that's got a passing interest in what would a human do in a specific scenario. And we can see real expansion, as this grows, and hopefully we get to this season two point with it. I'd like to start working with like bigger name writers from the traditional world. I'm like, okay, what do you think would make the ultimate combatant? Who do you think would win? And they write the backstories, and we kind of are able to do live streaming events. I can see there being this becoming more like Big Brother, where our episodes are recapping what happened yesterday and then going out on AiMation. And of course, we've got broadcast rights and all that stuff that we can sell. So it's kind of the linchpin for us. It's the jewel in the crown. But what it does is it really drives user acquisition. If I said to you, there's a really cool app and you can download it, it's got AI anime on it, you'd be like, yeah, maybe. But if I said to you, dude, there's six people trying to kill each other, but they're all AIs. Like you would go, where do I watch that? And so that's kind of why this exists and why I think it's, important in terms of, again, exploring IP expansion. Like it's very easy to do this for Sims or, have a house full of minions. What do they do when they're not filming? It's super easy to expand IP into this AI reality space.
And do you own the IP for NPC?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
That's because you design the characters. They're not AI generated. It's
Yeah, but even then, like I still, and I'm sure I can see some questions popping up about the legals and stuff. Like, I think, again, my job is really to be a futurist. Like, where's this going? Like, we're here because I guessed in 2022 this would be where we're at. It's like, okay, so where are we 2 years from now? And they're educated guesses. They're not just plucked out of thin air. But to me, it looks like two things are going to happen, and two things are already true, I think. which is the input data argument from a legal perspective is very different from the output data argument. And there's a sort of a fundamental misunderstanding with this tech that's, if I type Wolverine into Midjourney, the Midjourney just has a picture of Wolverine on a shelf and it pulls it down. That's not how this works. It's looked at Wolverine, it's broke him down linguistically, it's put all of these different linguistic words and it can cross reference them. And if I say, give me Wolverine, it goes, I know what Wolverine looks like. And it pulls stuff back together and then gives you a picture of him. If I go and buy an iPad and I start drawing pictures of Wolverine and then I go distribute those pictures, I am in breach of that copyright, not the iPad. And I think that we're going to see output be all about user intent. And we're going to see the input stuff settle into the only sensible model, which is a PRS model. Eventually they'll cave. OpenAI and all the rest will sign up to like a global PRS model, similar to the one we have for music.
PRS, for people who don't know what it is, just as quickly.
Yeah, so PRS is a system for making money from music that you've had put out there. If a radio station plays it, you get a little bit of money. So all the record labels and all the stations and TV channels, they pay a nominal fee to PRS every year. And then I might log into PRS and say, put my song in, and I go, this got played like 20 times. I got $52. Great. And I just claim my money, right? That's going to happen for the input training issue, where the AI companies are going, fine, we'll do like an AI PRS. We'll all put 10 million a year into this pot. I'll go and log onto the website at the end of the year. I'll put my name in. I see, they scraped 2 of my films. I'll collect my $52. Most people will never bother going on the site because most musicians don't go and collect their PRS money. It's free money sitting there for them, and they rarely go and collect it. There's entire businesses built around just making money from PRS because no one claims it. That's going to happen on the input argument. On the output argument, though, this is about user intent, where the breach of copyright is coming from me. I said, give me Wolverine. If I said, give me a yellow superhero, I'm not getting Wolverine. That's not what comes out. And so the intention is coming from me. And so what this is going to do is really reshape chain of title for products going forward, where at the moment, when I make a movie traditionally or a TV show, I need the writer's agreement, the director's agreement, producer agreement, the location agreement. This is my chain of title. And I want these things very specifically because if somebody comes along 2 years from now and says, you stole my idea, we're going to go to court. And in court, the judge is going to say to that guy, you have to prove that Tom had the intent to steal your copyright and the means of access to your script or whatever it was. And if he loses on one of those cases, I'm going to award you some money. And if he loses on both those fronts, I'm going to award the IP to you. So this is kind of global. This is kind of how it works. And with AI, this becomes infinitely trickier. Now you're going to need a chain of title for every single shot that went into this thing, every bit of music, every bit of dialogue. So what you need is a safe place that you force your production crew to use, where I'm going to get the documentation out the back of this, and they cannot write things like in the style of Shrek. It will be blocked out. And that way, when I get to court in 2 years because somebody says I stole their idea, the judge says, well, you need to prove that you didn't have the intent. I can hand over this 2,000-page prompt document that we got automatically out of the system. And the judge says, well, they never mentioned your show. They never mentioned your thing. The intention clearly isn't there. You can't copyright an aesthetic. So no case, And if you don't have those things, you're going to be in trouble, because what happens if you had a rogue intern that came in for 1 week, made one picture, wrote in the style of Shrek, and then you go to court and some guy from DreamWorks is the one that's suing you, and the judge goes, well, you did use somebody else's copyright language as a reference point. Or what happens if you use somebody's picture as the style reference without doing a step that breaks the picture down linguistically? And so we built Omnigeno 1 to be future-proof for this. Like, you come in, use the system, you can't write in the style of Shrek. Everything is broken down linguistically. And more importantly, that very labor-intensive task of having a legal chain of title document that you can slide in with your other contracts, you just press the download button with us. So that's kind of why I was saying, look, it's the final draft of this, and we're trying to get out ahead of what we think is coming. But I think there's a good case if you went to court right now and you had that document. I still think you'd be okay. I still think you'd win because it's the input and the output arguments are two separate. They're two separate legal discussions.
And Omnigen, just to clarify, is a platform that you've built for in-house AI generation. Is that correct?
Yep. So it's enterprise only. So let's say you're an intellectual property holder, maybe a mid-level studio. You've had two or three big hits, but you've got 20 developed projects, and for whatever reason, the package just didn't come together. You can come to us, and what we'll say is, okay, we'll onboard you into Omnigen '01. It's 125 US dollars a user, but you pay for tokens. You pay for them up front. You set your own burn rate. You get support from us, and we're going to help you make a Where the Robots Grow in 4 weeks out of your non-active content. You can either buy us out of that non-exclusive license, or if you're going to go digital first with it anyway, why not put it on AiMation too? Why not find out just how much revenue is there? And this is really our scale model here. This is how we're going to scale this up. And we launch on June the 30th. So there's at least two major studios in the trial already. There's a bunch of very well-known names joining. So if you are an IP holder out there and you're like, okay, let's give PGC a go, DM me on LinkedIn.
All right. I want to see if I want to do one experiment before we go because we're at the hour. I want to see if we can get Anand on the call to ask a question because Anand is one of my Anand, but like one of my favorite, one of the smartest people I talk to in this space. And I want to get why is this so hard? Not a good product. All right, we go. It could be a better product. Let's see what happens. I invite him to join. But I mean, I think the IP thing's fascinating. But are any of the studio stuff currently in the beta or no?
Yeah. Everybody's in the beta, so we let.
Okay.
So for those of you that I should have mentioned, you can try the GVOD platform out in closed beta right now.
Yep.
We let in a small amount of users, really to test whether it was crashing. Where were the holes? I'm pleased to say it's we've had 0% crashes. We've had 9.4 active sessions per user. It's doing everything we hoped it would. So we are still letting some closed beta users in if you want to come and have a look at it in its infancy, and then we'll be rolling out this summer with the main build.
All right. So Anand doesn't have the Substack app, so he's not going to join us. But his last question was his question was just about the short term value of content, right? About if there's no more culture, is novelty the only value of IP, right? Because I think you're making a really really interesting point that I just had a debate with somebody. They got very upset about copy I wrote in the video that just went out today, where I said that Netflix is that ChatGPT is taking millions of people who would otherwise sign up for Netflix, and it's just copy that like Claude wrote for me, but I liked it
Yeah,
because it was a logical implication of the point I was actually making in the piece, which is ChatGPT and even your app are interchangeable with Netflix at the price point, right? That everybody is complaining about at this point. People are like, why do I want to spend another $20 for HBO Max or one of these other apps? And your point is that all these that we have to rethink the engagement with IP and content now in this age of AI. And the point that I was making is, and somebody else has made this to me, and I think it's the right argument, is that they're interchangeable, right? That if you have a choice between spending $20 on Netflix or spending $20 in ChatGPT or Real Good or AiMation, that actually they're the same decision. They're not like totally different decisions.
yeah.
Um, and I think that's the fascinating. I think it's a fascinating way to think about this moment. But that goes back to Anand's question, which is, well, like, what is it? What is culture if it's just like fleeting?
Yeah, I think to be honest, culture has sort of become this like self-cannibalizing industry. You know, like I can point to the '70s and say, flares, punk rock, disco, the '80s, new romantics, shoulder pad jackets, the '90s, grunge. What's today? Like, how will people define today's fashion style? It's become a sort of a land grab of nostalgia where it's a bit of everything from before. The remix of culture has become too excessively fast for it to settle. But that doesn't mean that you can't get stuff to latch on. I just think to your point about ChatGPT and Netflix, it's like Previously, when it comes to IP, especially movie and TV based IP, the attention war is for your eyeballs. That's where the fight is. Like, okay, how do I get you to look at my thing? And the eyes are the window to the soul, right? So if you look at this and you love it, I've got you and you're an IP fan forever. But the world has changed. Now the attention is for these. You're going in the wrong place. If you're after this is where attention goes. But you can build habitual relationships between your IP, this and these all at the same time. TikTok does it all the time. TikTok has multi millionaires from this exact thing. I love this person. So you have to include these extra two digits in the equation for making as somebody fall in love with whatever you're trying to convey to them. And it works. It works in Webtoon. It works in Real Short. It works in TikTok. It works for Netflix when they have something that plays very well with second screen. So, why are Netflix sort of making stuff where it's audio based? Someone's like, I'm leaving the room now. It's like, yeah, they know damn well that you're doing this on your phone and you're not looking over there, but the relationship is still occurring. So, what we're doing is we're just taking that to its next logical step and saying, well, what if we keep these busy and we keep that sort of, haptic feedback relationship with you and your mobile native world you now live in, but we still tell good stories. We still let good IP sink in. I think that culture can emerge in that environment. It's just it can't emerge when you're just focusing on I just want them to watch something. We've left that space as a species. We don't exist there anymore.
All right. Well, on that note, let's end it here.
Wow, that
No,
was
but
intense.
no, it's not. I think I think it's a really fascinating point. Like, I mean, this debate I just had with somebody, and they were legitimately upset that I'd made the point without data. But to me, I think we're in this moment where I just think that ChatGPT, and again, your point about engagement, Netflix's story is engagement now.
Yeah.
That's its
Yeah.
entire story. It's like, oh, we
Yeah.
used to be streaming, we used to be gaming, we're streaming, but now we're gaming and engagement. And it's like, okay, well, if you're engagement, ChatGPT is engagement,
Hmm.
and real good is engagement. And it's always said like Fortnite, it competes for eyeballs and attention with Fortnite and other places. But I think it competes for dollars with those people too, and with those businesses too. And I think you just have we all have to sort of stop for a second and think, well, wait a minute. In this age of ChatGPT, what is user delight?
Yeah.
And the interesting, this is something I wrote about before, and it was really kind of when like Warner Brothers Discovery blew up. And I want to finish this up because I want to be respectful to your time, but it's just an interesting point of what you're saying. And they were before the Warner Brothers Discovery, before the Warner Media management got kicked out. Jason Kyler and then all the HBO Max guys.
Yeah.
Um, they were talking about the connection between beloved worlds and beloved characters and the consumer. And what they're basically saying is, no, we shouldn't be talking about streaming. We should be talking about the consumer's relationship
So
with the content and with the IP. And that it's ultimately like how they engage with that is going to be the future of this business and not big movies and not big games alone.
you have to like water this down. And to me, it's just the most basic sentence that applies to nearly everybody in 2025. You pay for what you engage with your thumbs. I love Amazon. I'm scrolling and touching. I love TikTok. I love Instagram. Like if I pay for what my thumbs enjoy touching on, that's just the way the world works now. I pay for ChatGPT because I'm like, yeah, look at me go. This is the world we live in.
Yep.
If you want your IP to have value, you better keep your users' thumbs busy. Is my big takeaway.
We're going to end on that because that's a perfect ending. All right, Tom, really appreciate it. Always a pleasure. And we'll speak soon.
Appreciate it, man. Take
Thanks,
care.
man. You too.
Bye.
Bye.